What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another Battlefield Gun Guide. In this series, we take a deep dive into the stats of the guns, and then toward the end, I share some recommended attachment combinations with these to really get the most out of them. And in today's episode, we're going to be moving on to the AK4D. And starting it off, as always, when it comes to our raw power potential, with our rate of fire, we actually have the slowest rate of fire in the assault rifle category at just 514 rounds per minute. So it is a very unforgiving gun, but at least unlike the SOAR 5.56, which also has a slow rate of fire, this thing hits like a truck. In our maximum damage range, which extends out to 21.5 meters, this will be a 3-shot kill to the body for a 233 millisecond time to kill, which is a little bit better than average. It's not an exceptional time to kill by any means, but it's certainly not bad. Then when it comes to headshots, it is worth noting by default, headshots aren't going to be doing anything for you in this damage range at least. Like, it's still going to be a 3-shot kill if every bullet hits the head, unless we're using hollow point, in which case, if both shots hit the head, we can get a 2-shot kill for a ridiculously fast time to kill potential at 117 milliseconds. As for the second damage range, which extends out to 75 meters, this is where it's going to be a 4-shot kill for a slightly worse than average time to kill at 350 milliseconds. And then finally, beyond 75 meters, it will be a 5-shot kill, and it's getting even slower than average at 467 milliseconds. Next, let's have a look at our damage ranges compared to the other assault rifles, and it's very standard here. However, it is nice to see the time to kill values relative to the other assault rifles. And we can see up close, it is killing quite fast for an assault rifle, and it is one of the upsides with this gun. It's just as you start stretching the ranges out, you start to lose that time to kill benefit relative to the others. As for our muzzle velocity, this gun's basically smack dab in the middle of the assault rifle category at 720 meters per second. That's not a bad muzzle velocity by any means, and it does have a standard drag coefficient, meaning it just performs somewhere in the middle for an assault rifle. So definitely not a standout in this area. Then for hipfire, it's the exact same as the other assault rifles in the game. However, it is worth mentioning, with this having a slower rate of fire, it is very unforgiving time to kill wise for any missed shots. And as a result, it's not a gun that's super well suited to hipfire, at least as a primary playstyle. It's fine if you want to hipfire in really close ranges, but outside of that, I'd try to make sure that you're actually getting on target and maximizing your hit potential. And with that, that brings us to the recoil of the AK4D. And this gun is fairly interesting. While it doesn't have a ton of recoil, it is worth noting it does have quite a high initial recoil value. So when you first pull that trigger, it does jump upward very, very quickly, and then it settles in nicely to where there's very little recoil after that. So as you continue to fire, it is very easy to control this. And on top of that, when it comes to our aim down sight spread, this gun doesn't have a ton of spread to it. Even when holding down the trigger for a while, that's not bad at all. Although it is worth noting when looking at this recoil plot, we're only firing 20 rounds with the AK4D because that's its normal magazine capacity, rather than 30 like with most of the other guns here. So that does make this recoil plot look a little bit better than it actually would be if we were firing 30 rounds. But even with that in mind, this gun is fairly easy to control outside of that initial recoil. Now, getting into our handling stats, this is just standard for assault rifles, although, like we just mentioned, this is an outlier in the sense that its base magazine capacity is quite low at just 20 rounds, and our reload time isn't amazing considering that small magazine and the fact that you have to reload very often. This is 2.47 seconds by default, or 2.18 seconds if you use one of the fast mags, which I generally recommend with this gun. Then when it comes to mobility, it's just standard for an assault rifle. Nothing out of the ordinary here. These are all exactly the same values for all of these. And then finally, before we get into some recommended attachment setups, let's have a look at some REDSEC stats. And if we're fighting against enemies with 2 armor plates equipped, this gun will be a 6-shot kill up close for a 584 millisecond time to kill. That's actually not bad at all in REDSEC. But of course, as you stretch out the ranges, it's going to take 8 shots to kill for mid-range and 10 shots to kill at longer ranges. And especially with its slower rate of fire being quite unforgiving and its small magazine capacity, this gun will often be quite limited once you start getting into that like 10-shot kill range, because you're likely to be missing a few shots here or there as well, which will significantly spike your time to kill and also drain your magazine very quickly. So there we go. With all of that out of the way, we can finally move into some excellent attachment combinations I've got for you guys. And the first one I wanted to share is just my balanced all-around build. This is the one you'll see me using 9 times out of 10 when using the AK4D. With this, we have the OSA 7 optic, which I really like. We have the light and suppressor, because this one helps a little bit with recoil control. We have the heavy extended barrel, which improves our spread a little bit, as well as our muzzle velocity. It bumps that up to 900 meters per second. Then we're using the stippled stubby for our underbarrel grip. the 20 round fast mag, so we get that slightly faster reload time, and then just the standard ammo. And with this particular setup, we are cutting down on that recoil nicely, especially with that initial recoil. So this definitely makes it a lot easier to manage that initial recoil. And it just makes for a nice, solid, all around gun. Generally speaking, I like keeping myself like close to mid-range with this. It's not that it can't handle gunfights at longer ranges, it's just you don't really have the time to kill advantage at that point. And as I've been saying, with a really slow rate of fire, any missed shots will spike your time to kill, and the more you're stretching out your range, the more likely you are to be missing shots, which does limit its power there. So that's the first one, and like I said, that's my preferred setup with the AK4D. However, I wanted to share a second very interesting setup here. I call this my mini DMR setup. With this one, I really wanted to lean into the fact that this is a higher damage gun, and since it already has a slow rate of fire, it isn't punished as much as many of the other guns in the game for using the match trigger and swapping over to semi-auto, where we're going to be seeing some really big benefits here. And we'll get into that in just a second. I just want to blast through the other attachments here. For my optic, I'm using the ROM 1.75 magnification, just so I get that little bit of extra zoom, because this one is going to be more for picking people off at a bit of a range. We've got the standard suppressor here. We once again have the heavy extended barrel, the ribbed stubby underbarrel, the 20 round fast mag, and the standard ammunition. And with this one, the huge benefit is when we swap over to semi-auto, which I would recommend doing with this, while using that match trigger, it effectively eliminates recoil and spread. As you can see there, all the bullets are going into the same hole. So this thing is absolutely pinpoint accurate, even more so than some of the DMRs in this game. And you also maintain some better handling and mobility stats compared to the DMRs. However, the trade-off here is our rate of fire potential is cut down to about 360 rounds per minute, which does increase our time to kill as well. So that is something to be aware of, and it does kill the versatility of this, but it makes for a nice specialty weapon that actually performs quite well if you treat it like a DMR. You get yourself set up in a nice location, and you just lock down a longer line of sight. There are not too many guns in the game that will be able to consistently outgun you when doing this because you're just so incredibly accurate while still dealing solid amounts of damage. So that's a nice alternative setup. Like I said, obviously not nearly as versatile as the first setup that I'm going to be using the majority of the time, but I just thought this one was interesting and would be fun to try out. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's gun guide on the AK4D. And when it comes to my thoughts on this particular rifle, while it may not be my favorite gun in the game or anything, and it can be quite unforgiving if your shot is just not feeling on point for the day, if you are feeling comfortable with your aim and you're hitting your shots consistently, this gun will reward you quite nicely for that, and I have been able to find a lot of success with this, so I do enjoy it, but again, not my favorite by any means. Of course, that is just my opinion though, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about the AK4D in those comments down below. Do you guys enjoy this gun, or maybe not so much? Now, if you guys have missed any of the previous episodes of Gun Guides, I've been blasting through them. I will leave a link to the playlist in the description down below, and there are many more to come, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll talk to you guys next time.